Jeg heter Nils Brünner. Jeg er CEO for Scandion Oncology. But as you heard, I'm also from Denmark, even though I was born in Borås, but that's many years ago. So I will also speak in English. I think it's better for you than if I tried in Swedish. So anyway, my background is medical oncology, and then I got an additional education in cancer research from the US. And I've been working with resistance for many, many years. And what is resistance? Most of us know the word antibiotic resistance. We know that there'll be a major problem within 10, 15 years in the world because we are using too much antibiotics and the bacteria becomes resistant and we cannot kill the bacteria any longer and they will kill us. That's a fact. But what fewer people know is that cancer cells also develop resistance, and they can do that within months. So when we treat a cancer patient with chemotherapy, anti-hormone therapy, and so on, we can see in some patients there's an initial response, so the cancer gets smaller, but within months even, the cancer starts growing again and it has become resistant. And it's a major problem, and I'll try to highlight this problem. For me, as a medical oncologist, it's actually the largest unsolved problem as of today. And we'll look a little bit at it. I made a rather focused presentation where we'll focus on what Scandion Oncology is going to do in the near future. I'll go through it, and I'll also spend some more time on each slide than I'm usually doing in order to explain what's happening. But just to come back to resistance, this is a slide on the Swedish population. And what you can see here, which is rather frightening, is that we have about 145 Swedish people being diagnosed with cancer every day, year-round. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and so forth, year-round. But of these 145 patients every day, 64 patients will die from cancer. And why do patients die from cancer? Because they develop resistance. If they didn't develop resistance, we have so many different cancer drugs, and new drugs are coming all the time, so we could easily cure all cancer patients. But the cancer cells become resistant, and often they become what we call multi-drug resistance, that they are not only resistant to the drug that we are using, but they at the same time become resistant to other drugs also. That is the major problem in today's oncology. And I also brought a slide showing the similar numbers in EU, and here I have added an additional number, that is that in the traffic in EU every day, 70 people are killed. But look at the numbers for cancer. We have 7,500 new diagnosed cancer patients every day in EU, and a little bit less than half of these patients, they will die from cancer due to resistance. And you can see how I've added SCO-101, which is our lead candidate, and this is actually our mission, is to change these numbers. Okay, I'll jump right into it. Scandion Oncology has a screening platform that we developed at the University of Copenhagen. We had what is called a Grundforskningsfond. It's a big government grant where we developed assays and technologies for drug resistance in cancer, and we explored the mechanism of resistance in cancer. And based on all this work, we have selected compounds or even drugs, repurposing drugs, to be used to block or circumvent resistance in cancer. And this is our pipeline slide. And you can see on the top we have SCO-101, which is our most advanced drug. And very briefly, we see this drug being used in breast and colorectal cancer as the main targets. We are rather far because when we identified the drug, it had already been tested in what is called clinical phase 1 studies for a non-cancer indication by another company that had went bankruptcy since. But the drug was still there, and we could get all the data package, and we are now ready to start phase 2 studies with this drug, and we'll do that in December 2019, as soon as the drug is produced at Cambrex in Karlskoga here in Sweden. Then our second drug compound is SCO-201, which we believe will be used to treat pancreatic and lung cancer patients being resistant to anti-cancer drugs. Recently, we could announce that we had identified a third candidate drug, SCO-301, and the very special thing about this drug is that it's already registered for a totally different cancer disease. So we can even, with a prescription, go to the pharmacy and buy this drug. So we don't need to do any drug production. We can go directly to a phase 2 study here. But we are working on this, and we are trying to optimize the drug and so on. But we can and might even do a phase 2 study right away on this. We have analogs. What is analogs? Analogs are drugs that are very similar to the mother drug, you can say, but changed a little bit and optimized. So we optimize. So from behind, we have a development line where we develop these analogs with optimized characteristics. Then it says something about antibiotic resistance. I'll come back to that. This is a new finding we have reported, and we'll discuss it a little bit later. But the conclusion from this slide is that even though we had our IPO a little bit more than 6 months ago, we are rather far here. And you can see here that actually within this year, we'll have the first very important milestone, treating the first cancer patient with drug-resistant cancer with one of our drugs. So this SCO-101, as I said, it has been through phase 1 studies. It's an oral formulation, so it's a tablet to be taken once a day together with chemotherapy. It passed these 4 phase 1 studies. It's very safe and has very limited toxicity. Nothing we have to be afraid of in cancer patients at all. We also know how it works. It's inhibiting some pumps that are on the outside of cancer cells, and these pumps, they pump out chemotherapy as soon as it gets into the cells. It's being pumped out, so it can never kill the cells. Another mechanism of action that we have disclosed here is that it's also inhibiting a specific intercellular signaling pathway. It's something called kinases, and these kinases that our drug is inhibiting are involved in drug resistance as well. And as far as we know, our drug is the only one ever being described that can inhibit this kinase. So, as I said, we are ready for phase 2. I think we have been fortunate, we have been lucky. We have had tur, as it is in Swedish, because we were able to take this drug after it had passed phase 1, and we can start phase 2 studies. I'll spend a little time on this slide because this shows the clinical plan, the clinical design of such a study. The patients that we will recruit for such a study here are patients where there are no more treatment. So they have failed current treatment, they have become resistant to treatment, and as an oncologist, you have to tell the patient and the family, unfortunately, we don't have more treatment. Your cancer is resistant. We cannot do anything more for you. We have divided our study into 2 parts. The first part will recruit 12 patients, and here we will keep the dose of chemotherapy stable. It's constant, it's 100% chemotherapy, and then we increase the dose of SCO-101. First 3 patients, 50%, next 3 patients, 75%, and last 6 patients, 100% SCO-101. This is a safety measure to be sure when we combine, we don't see added toxicity. We have many animal studies where it's combined, there's no added toxicity. When this is done, we are ready to go to the second part of the phase 2 study, where the main objective is to look for efficacy. That means, does it work? Remember again, these patients, there are no other treatment for them. So what we are looking for here is, can we reduce the size of the tumor? These are patients with metastases. They cannot be treated any longer, but we expect to see that the tumors will shrink because we block the resistant mechanism and the chemotherapy will work again. I said that the first patient will be treated in December already here this year, and it's a one-year study. We expect to recruit the patients within 1 year, and so we will have the first or the final data at Q4 2020. Then it says at the bottom, 6 patients from the run-in study are included here. So the last 6 patients in the first part who gets 100% SCO-101 and 100% chemotherapy, they will be the first 6 patients in the second part. So we're actually only recruiting 9 patients in the second part, but 6 plus 9 is 15. That's why it says 15 up here. What will we learn from these studies? So the first part of the study where we increase the dose of SCO-101 with the 12 patients, we'll see, are there any toxicity? Is it safe to give it? And then we'll be able to define what we call recommended dose for phase 2 studies. That means, can we give 100% SCO-101 or should we reduce it a little bit together with chemotherapy? And we'll use that onwards. Then we are looking for the pharmacokinetics. When we give SCO-101 together with chemotherapy, will there be a change in the metabolism of our drug? We don't expect it, but we need to look for it. And then we actually will be able to have the first validation of anti-cancer effects, because the last 6 patients, as you remember, they get 100% SCO-101 and 100% chemotherapy. So already 6 months into 2020, we will have the first efficacy data. And then we are also using what we call predictive biomarkers. So we are developing biomarkers to select patients where our drug will work. And I'll give you one example. I told you that our drug inhibits these pumps that are sitting in the membrane of cancer cells that are pumping out chemotherapy. We inhibit these pumps. So of course, we will make sure that our patients have these pumps. And this is the most often described mechanism of resistance in cancer are these pumps. And of course, we'll check this when we are recruiting patients in order to make sure that we get a highly selected group into our first study. And then you broaden it out afterwards and can take other patients. But to increase the chance of success, we pre-select the patients. Second part, this was the 6 plus 9 patients where they get 100% SCO, 100% chemotherapy. Here, the main objective is to look for the anti-cancer effects. And then we'll further validate our predictive biomarkers and we will confirm safety. And for these patients, we know if we gave them the chemotherapy only, none of them would have any benefit but only the side effects, because they are coming with progression from that chemotherapy. So they have already proven they are resistant. And then we only need a few patients who respond, and then we have proof of concept. Okay. As I told you, the patients that we recruit to our study are patients where we have had to tell them and their families that we have no more drugs to offer. This is not really the type of patients I would like to include in my studies. I would like to get to patients at diagnosis. So when a patient are diagnosed with cancer, I would like to offer them our treatment. And here is a little slide showing actually my vision for our drugs. Here over on the left side, you see a patient newly diagnosed with cancer, and we know now that in most cancers, there are already resistant cancer cells. A few of them scattered in the cancer, and these are the red cells. So here we give the patient chemotherapy, and on the second person here, you see that we can kill all the blue cells that are sensitive, but we couldn't kill the red cells because they were resistant. And over time, they will grow up, and they will form a new tumor. That means that there will be a progression of the cancer again, and it's growing, and eventually it will kill the patient. If we could have treated that patient with SCO-101 from the beginning, we might have been able to kill the red cells already from the beginning, and we should end up with a patient free of cancer. That is my vision. Okay, we have looked a little bit for the market potential of SCO-101. And here we have looked at breast and colorectal cancer, patients with metastatic disease, patients being treated and becoming resistant to those drugs where our drug SCO-101 works together with. And we have set a price on SCO-101 treatment to 4,000 euros per cycle of treatment. And we have calculated the number of patients in the United States and EU. And we had an independent company doing it. And we end up with 3.6 billion euros a year in peak sales. Unfortunately, there are so many of these patients. And this is only breast and colorectal cancer. Those drugs that our drug works together with are also being used in many other cancer diseases where the problems are the same. I'll spend the last part of my presentation talking about something totally different, but at the same time, very similar. So when I worked at the University of Copenhagen, we had a group working in microbiology, and they worked with antibiotic resistance. So I called them one day and said, could we do some collaboration? We have a drug that inhibits resistance in cancer. Could we look whether it has any effects in bacteria and antibiotic resistance? And I got 2 weeks later a smiley back. And this is actually the main result. Here on the left side, you see all these small yellow dots. These are bacteria that are resistant, and they grow despite that we have added antibiotics to the well here. On the other side, to the right, you see the same bacteria, but now we treat with SCO-101 analogs. And you can see here that it totally eradicates all the bacteria. So we are, Scandion Oncology is a cancer company. We are cancer experts, we are oncologists, we are cancer researchers. So we are not supposed to work with antibiotic resistance, and we will not. But we have our colleagues at the university, and they have done fantastic work until now, but in the future it will not be Scandion Oncology. It will be in another setup that we are working on, because we need experts into this area, which is very important. But we are at a stage where we have lead optimization, so we have passed a couple of milestones already, and very soon it can go into preclinical studies. That means mice, rats that will be infected with antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and we will then see how it works, whether we can still kill the bacteria and get more effect of conventional antibiotics also. But it's going to be removed from Scandion Oncology, a spin-out, a selling, whatever, and so on, and that's what we are working on, and I hope we soon will come with a solution to this. But this is a very important area. Could be as big as cancer. It's estimated that in 2050, there will be 10 million deaths in the world based on antibiotic resistance. Because when bacteria become resistant to antibiotics, we have a second-line antibiotics perhaps, they will become resistant to that also, and now we cannot cure the patient, and the bacteria will kill the patient. What is the market for antibiotics? Here is a slide on gram-positive antibiotics, new antibiotics. And it can be seen here that they can easily reach $1 billion US in annual sales, peak sales. It's a huge market also. And I don't see a drug like ours to be used as first line instead of penicillin and so on. No, our drug will be reserved to when the patients have antibiotic resistance bacteria, which there will be many of, and then it can be used there and you can price it much better. Second last slide, our management team. I'm proud of my team we have collected, and you can see we are covering both preclinical and clinical work. We have Jan Stenvang, who is here, co-founder of Scandion Oncology, being our scientific officer. Jan has developed a lot of the background material we have for Scandion Oncology. We have Peter Michael Westlev, who is a medical oncologist also. He and I work together at the oncology departments in Denmark, and he has spent 6 years in the Danish medicines agency, Danske Lægemiddelverket. So he knows everything about how we are proceeding with our protocols. And then very recently we added Niklas Rose to our management team. Niklas is a pharmacist, but he is a regulatory expert, so he's now responsible for submitting all the paperwork when we are starting our clinical trials. I still have a little bit, or yes. Okay, good. And I should say that we have already seen the fruit of having Niklas there, because we had a meeting here recently with the Danish Lægemiddelverket, and we presented our concept, our clinical design and so on, and they totally approved it. And we got so positive feedback, and that was, of course, based on an important area, good preclinical data, but also the way that Niklas had set it up. It's very important. So with this, I expect that Scandion Oncology will, end of 2020, have their first data, efficacy data, showing that adding SCO-101 to chemotherapy in drug-resistant cancer patients will benefit the patients, and eventually we will be able to cure more patients from cancer. Secondly, in the antibiotic area, I expect rather soon that we have a conclusion on how we'll proceed with this, and it has to get its own life to be developed and reach the patients, so we can also cure patients with antibiotic-resistant diseases. Thank you for your attention.
So I think just first off, we need to adjust your microphone just a little bit, like that. Perfect. Thank you, Nils. I think it's very, very exciting what you're doing at Scandion Oncology, I have to say. I think as an investor, let's just talk a little bit about the perspectives of Scandion Oncology. I think in breast and colorectal cancer, we're talking about peak sales in excess of 3.6 billion euros. And that's just breast and colorectal cancer. Then there's a plethora of other cancer types, right? And furthermore, there is, of course, your antibiotic resistance as well. So quite huge potential. What are the major milestones beyond 2020? What's going to happen if you succeed? What kind of company are we looking into as an investor?
So our plan is that we'll start business development now, because I think we are ready to really, I mean, we have met big pharma companies that are our main customers. I mean, we're looking for companies that are already in the oncology market, so they can take our drugs out to the patients. When are they interested? They're interested when we start phase 2 studies. They want to see that we can give it together. They're especially interested when we have the first efficacy data in mid-2020. And of course, hopefully they will be in a long queue when we have the final data showing that actually we can help patients, and then we are ready to sell 101. I also want, over the next period of time, to be able to further develop 201 and 301. So we have announced that we are applying for EU grants, and we have already received a number of grants to further develop our pipeline of drugs. So I think there are a number of very important milestones: next clinical study in another disease and so on, selling off or spinning out microbiology and so forth. So of course I have my own list. I have my own list up here with milestones that I want to reach. And of course, they are also on a big scheme that we have in the company. But I can see that we have a lot of news coming out over 19, but especially in 2020.
Yeah, and I guess actually 19 as well. Of course, it's not possible to disclose exactly today, but I think the part with the antibacterial, resistance to that is extremely exciting. But can you tell a little bit about what are the plans? I mean, it's going to be in a separate company, and what kind of income will that generate to Scandion Oncology?
Yeah. Of course, my job as the CEO is to create value for Scandion Oncology shareholders. Period. And we are now trying to find the best way to do this. And there are a couple of options, as I mentioned, but at present, I would really like to be able to tell you, but that might be at the next Sedermere Day or Aktiespar Day. We haven't decided yet, but we will decide, and very soon. We are searching for different options and so forth, but it has to get out and has its own life, so I can focus on the cancer part. But it will happen, yes.
So I think, to me, there are actually many roads for Scandion Oncology generating revenue for you in the future, or income. Overall, would you say, why invest in Scandion Oncology? What are the main reasons why you would invest in Scandion Oncology, if you were to say so?
Yeah, I mean, there are different reasons to invest, of course. Here we are at the investment meeting and people want to earn money, and that is legal. And I think there's a very, very good possibility that we will see a good development in the stock price of Scandion Oncology. We are still low, going around up and down the IPO price. But now a lot of things will happen and so on. But there's a second reason. And several investors have actually said to me, Nils, you know, if you succeed, it's fantastic. If you don't, if it turns out that it doesn't work for some reason and so on, at least we have supported cancer research and we have tried it because there's a huge medical need. And we all have families, friends that are died from cancer, and we need to change it.
And with that said, those were the final words. Thank you very much, Nils.
Thank you.